So maybe you have just bought an FX3 and you are super confused, or maybe you're as confused as I was when I first picked up my Sony FX3 and was going through the whole menu system, being like, what the heck am I doing? How do I figure this out? What are the best settings that I can set my camera to? So I spent hours and hours trying to figure out and fine tune all the settings to be able to get my camera, my FX3, where I want it to be. And so I wanted to share that with you. So hopefully that'll be helpful. Jump right into kind of the menu system and go step by step through the whole menu system, the things that I've changed, things I've kept, factory settings, and just all the little things. Again, this is for my taste, what I have appreciated and needed out of my FX3. So make sure to pause at certain spots that you want to pause at, just to dial in everything and make sure yours is matching. Or feel free to skip over something, or ask me in the comments below why I've got certain settings the way they are. I'm happy to help out in whatever way I can. But without further ado, let's jump right in and get into this menu system. Main 1, main 2 are just kind of your main settings of what the camera is in a quick menu. We're gonna go through the entire setting system here before we get back to the main menu, main 1 and main 2, just to see what we've got, because it's in the other sections that are really gonna get into the nuts and bolts. So, jumping into shooting, starting off with the image quality. File format, we're going with the XAVC SI 4K. That's going to be your H.264 file format. So the H.265 is just going to be more compressed. It's going to be harder on the computer, and I don't need that. If I can save any kind of time editing, I want to go with that. So I want to go with the uncompressed or less compressed H.264 and get the highest quality possible. So that's the XAVC SI 4K. My movie settings, you're going to be setting that up, frame rate, and the S and Q for slow motion. So I can quickly set that up to make it go 120 frames per second if I want it. And then just in my regular shooting, I'll kind of flip-flop between 60 frames per second and the 23 frames per second. Log shooting. So this is kind of what I found is the best or the easiest for me. That's the Cine EI. That just allows me to choose between the two base or native ISOs, 800 and 12,800. That's going to give you your cleanest image, and shooting in Cine EI just allows me with the press of a button to swap back and forth between 800 and 12,800. So it just makes it super easy. Then I don't have to worry about accidentally, shooting at 640 or 10,000 or, something like that. This makes it easy to swap back and forth between the two. And all I have to worry about exposure wise is just my shutter speed and my aperture. And the color gamut, this is what I've seen, provides the most dynamic range, the most flexibility in post. That's the S Gamut 3 Cine S-Log 3. And then I do embed a LUT file. Getting into proxies, I don't really need to. I don't record any proxies, so don't need to go through that. Lens compensation, I just have all of it off. I can fix or do anything in post that I need to. I just want to make sure that the camera isn't doing too much that's going to cause something to be harder or impossible to redo in post. So I'm just going to keep all of that stuff off. Record media settings, don't really need to get into that. That's just which slot you're going to be recording into. And next we're going into file. Again, I just kind of leave that as the factory settings. Shooting mode, I have the manual exposure. So I want to be in control of everything, and that's why I choose the exposure control type being not the flexible exposure mode. I want to have the most possible amount of control when I'm shooting. So again, the
camera set memory and memory recall, I just kind of keep as factory settings. Silent mode settings, I do have the silent mode on, and target function settings. Here we have standard and off, and release without lens. So this is where you may run into issues if you're shooting with a lens that maybe it's a vintage lens or a cinema lens, something that's not directly connecting to the camera. This allows you to shoot with that even when the camera doesn't recognize it, because you've got control of the aperture and the lens. So make sure to have that enabled if you're going to be shooting with a lens that may not be recognized by the camera. Audio recording I have on, and the only other one that I really mess with, I make sure that the wind noise reduction is off, and then have it at the 48 kilohertz and 24-bit 2-channel. Time code stuff I just keep as the factory settings. I don't worry too much about time code. That's not really in my workflow. Image stabilization, I've got it at steady shot, standard. There's going to be certain situations where I want it completely off, so I just keep it in standard. I don't want it too crazy and looking a little bit more natural. Zoom, I kind of keep factory settings. Shoot display, I toggle kind of on and off sometimes with my grid line display, so I'll just put on the rule of thirds grid, and right now I just have it off. But the other thing that I would highly recommend is the emphasized record display. There's been so many times in the past where I've kind of half pressed the button and I thought it was recording when it wasn't, or it wasn't recording when I thought it was. This just makes sure that everything lights up red. There's a big red box around your screen. It says record, so you know when you are recording and when you're not. So I keep that on. And then marker display, I don't really worry about it all. Next, getting into the exposure. So this is, again, your Cine EI is going to kind of create most of this standard for you. Auto slow shutter is on. The ISO range limit doesn't really matter. Again, base ISO is going to be toggling between the 800 and the 12,800. I keep it on 800 and just keep my exposure index where it was set originally, and that's at 800. Exposure compensation, I don't have on. The exposure step 0.3, and all this is just kind of left the same. Metering, the metering mode I make multi and have it on as a face priority, and the spot metering point is in the center. I'm gonna make another video just where I would switch these settings. Metering can sometimes be a little tricky. Making sure I get the right exposure can be a little tricky sometimes with S-Log3. And so I just wanna, I'll make another video about how to properly expose and how to work with S-Log3 footage. I'm really excited to put that one out, but for the most part, these are the settings that I'm using here with the metering. White balance, standard stuff here. The color tone, this is where you can pop on a LUT just so that what you're looking at on the screen is what it's gonna be like most likely in post, where you're tossing on a LUT. This does not bake it into your image. So the LUT that I toss on there is the 709. So again, that's just your basic kind of Rec 709 LUT that's gonna get it to a neutral look. And that can also just help with exposure and seeing what your image is gonna look like. Zebra display, I have it off right now, but I do set the zebra level to 75. Getting into the autofocus and manual focus, I do put the auto focus assist on. Focus area, I keep wide, and I use focus peaking, especially when I'm shooting on a manual lens, and I'm gonna make that red. Just makes it pop and stand out a lot more instead of the white, and keep everything there. It does not circulate, standard. So for the face and eye tracking autofocus, I have that on. I make sure my subject is human. There's a couple times where I might switch that out, but for the most part, shooting humans. And next, I keep it on auto and making sure that the faces are a priority. Focus assistant, I don't really change anything here. And then the peaking display, I make sure that it's on, that it's high, and that, again, my color is red. So for playback and for the network, I just keep all of that factory setting. I don't really change anything. There's nothing really in there that needs to be changed, in my opinion. Let me know if you think differently. And then lastly, there's a couple spots here that I have customized. So again, area, date, that's where you're gonna be getting your date and your language and your time and all that right. Oops. And so operation customize. So here's where I'm gonna customize a couple things that I found really handy. So this is for photos. I don't take photos on my FX3, but you're gonna wanna switch this up. Okay, so I've got a couple things here just on the rear. So focus magnifier, zebras, peaking, and here's where number 3, where I've switched to the base ISO switch. So this is where I think the Cine EI is super helpful. I can just toggle back and forth when I need a little bit more light or when I need to increase my ISO. So having number 3 there being my base ISO switch, super helpful. And then lastly, I switched up the back ring here, number 3, to my aperture. I found the number 1 up here is also my aperture, but I found it kind of, my hands are a little bit bigger, so switching my aperture up front here was kind of frustrating. It was a little bit difficult. So I've got my shutter speed for number 2, and number 3, the wheel controls my aperture, and that just makes it easier for me. So nothing else too much to change here. Record with shutter off. And again, the dial customization, we just kind of went through that. Touch operation. So I've got that on, touch sensitivity standard, and the touch function in shooting, touch focus. I think this is super helpful. There's times where I just want to tap on somebody's face to make it lock onto their face, and that allows you to do that. Monitor, this is where you're going to control your brightness, display quality. I mean, everything is kind of standard there. Display option. So this is where you can get into kind of the LUT stuff for when you're seeing what you're shooting. I have that on auto. Display LUT on, de-squeeze display off. If you're shooting anamorphic, your 1.3, 1.2, which will be a little tough when I get my set of Mercuries, because I need that at 1.5. Thankfully, my monitor can help me with that. The only other thing I would suggest changing, going into your USB, making sure that your USB power supply is on if you're using a V-mount or gold mount battery to power your FX3. Make sure that that's on. And so that kind of brings us back to the start. And here you can see in your main 1 and your main 2, that is everything that we have been changing or been working on.
So there you go, the whole menu system set up and how I've found this to kind of work the best for how I want to shoot, why I want to shoot things the way that I do. Again, let me know in the comments below if you've got any questions about anything at all, or any suggestions on future videos to make. Like I said, I'm gonna have one on how to grade S-Log footage, how to expose for S-Log footage, all FX3 Sony content coming your way soon. I'm excited because it's stuff that I've just been diving into lately and have been frustrated with how to find out certain stuff. So I want to share that with you guys and hopefully just be able to be helpful here on YouTube. So let me know your thoughts. I'd love to hear from you. And as always, I'll see you in the next video.